Hello dear friends, you are on the Ruslan Belov channel, and this is the daily summary of the combat situation from the Ukrainian front. When Peskov says that Ukraine, by refusing negotiations now, will receive a worse offer later and will end up in a much worse position, he is speaking precisely about what the Russian army is achieving on the battlefield. And today you will see this clearly in the summary. What strikes the armed forces of Ukraine are suffering, and what breakthroughs the Russian troops are making. They advance 10 kilometers. Every day they lose settlements. Therefore, if someone in Kiev thinks that by dragging out time they will receive more favorable conditions, well, then of course they are simply not thinking at all. So let us move on to analyzing the situation on the front. We will begin for the 6th time in a row with the advance of the Russian Vostok group, because they again have strong progress and have once again taken another settlement under their control. This happened in the Dnipropetrovsk region. Here, take a look. Yesterday I told you in the report that the fighting for Orestopol had ended. The guys showed objective control footage from the village, videos with flags, and not only flags, there was also video showing dozens of bodies of Ukrainian soldiers. That is what remains after the Far Eastern Express passes over them. The footage is quite striking. It shows the scale of losses suffered by the armed forces of Ukraine. Now, regarding what happened in the Dnipropetrovsk region, the troops advanced along a frontline sector more than 7 kilometers wide. At the same time, the depth of the advance was also significant, more than 4 kilometers. The entire territory south of Orestopol was cleared. Russian forces reached Orestopol and took the settlement under full control. And this is a very, very important advance. Why? Because after Orestopol, the next target is Velikomikhaylovka. And this is serious. It is not a small village, but the main issue is not the size. The point is that the village was used as a logistical hub. And with its fall, the armed forces of Ukraine will not only lose a large settlement, but will also face the very real possibility of Russian forces reaching the road north of the village, specifically the H-15 highway. And what would that mean? It would mean an encirclement and blockade of Pokrovsk from the east. And the settlement of Pokrovsk is the closest and most desirable objective here. In general, the armed forces of Ukraine are heading towards serious problems. If we speak about the figures, the area of the territory taken under control here exceeds 17 square kilometers. Orestopol has become the 27th settlement in the Dnipropetrovsk region to come under Russian control, and this number will continue to grow. In the near future, I would even say in the very near future, the capture of high looms. Plus, the troops are moving toward Nechayivka and Radizne. So it is entirely possible that by the end of the month, the number of captured settlements in the Dnipropetrovsk region will exceed 30. Meanwhile, in the neighboring Zaporizhzhia region, things for the armed forces of Ukraine are not just bad. I would say they are even worse. Yesterday, for example, the Ukrainian side announced an urgent evacuation of Huliaipol. In my opinion, they were late with this decision, and even though from the north, or rather from the northeast, Russian troops are still 7 kilometers away from the town, which is not so close, the trends indicate that by the end of the month, or perhaps even earlier, Russian forces may reach the outskirts of Huliaipol. The Ukrainian command understands this, which is why the evacuation has begun. At the moment, the situation is as follows. The clearing of Ravnopilia continues, and Yablukove, as far as I know, has already been cleared. Perhaps the soldiers will announce this today. But the armed forces of Ukraine do not have problems only in the zone of responsibility of the Vostok group. In the same Dnipropetrovsk region, the soldiers of the Center group achieved an incredible breakthrough in the Novopavlivka direction. Here the leap was an impressive 10 kilometers, even more than 10 kilometers. Here, take a look at the depth of the breakthrough achieved. The attack was carried out on motorcycles. Under the cover of fog, the soldiers burst into Novopavlivka and managed to take the entire eastern part of the village. This is truly something unbelievable. Novopavlivka, as you can clearly see on the map, is huge. To give you a sense of scale, Novopavlivka is 1.5 times larger than the town of Selidov. Selidov has an area of 10 square kilometers, while Novopavlivka has 15 square kilometers. And to break through 10 kilometers deep in one strike and take the entire eastern part of such a large settlement, wow! And the area that came under Russian control is enormous. The entire captured zone exceeds 35 square kilometers. What happens next? What are the prospects? The nearest objective, of course, is to clear the newly formed eastern pocket. And at minimum, to clear the eastern part of Novopavlivka. The village is divided by a river into two halves, and I think the guys will clear this soon. If they manage to take all of Novopavlivka, it will be a complete disaster for the armed forces of Ukraine, because from Novopavlivka there is a direct road to Medjova. But let us not rush ahead. Yes, the result shown by the troops is incredible. When was the last time we saw a 10-kilometer breakthrough? Still, the village is huge and split by a river, so I do not think it will be taken quickly. On the other hand, I did not expect the battles for Novopavlivka to begin before January. And now it is only mid-November, yet the eastern part is already under control. So anything is possible. It is obvious that the infantry reserves of the armed forces of Ukraine are shrinking, and they are increasingly unable to repel such strikes. Let us continue. The Ukrainian positions are also collapsing on the Steppnohirsk-Primorska sector in the Zaporizhzhia region. Not long ago, we reviewed the advances there, and now additional progress has been made. It is significant. Steppnohirsk has been fully blocked from the west and almost fully from the east. The troops advanced 340 meters along Central Street, 270 meters along Youth Street, and 100 meters along School Street. They also took control of the church and several industrial buildings on the northwestern edge of the urban-type settlement. Because of these advances, the Ukrainian forces in Steppnohirsk are essentially in operational encirclement. Yes, again, everything is repeating for them. From three sides, they are already blocked. They can retreat only through the northern exit, and the width of the corridor is only 1 kilometer and 200 meters, an extremely narrow passage, and the fall of Steppnohirsk will open the way for the Russian troops to the last serious defensive line before Zaporizhzhia, the Malikaterynivka-Hrihorivka line. After that, the Russian army will face open approaches to the southern outskirts of Zaporizhzhia. This is the situation. The armed forces of Ukraine are fighting desperately for Steppnohirsk. This must be acknowledged. The battles are heavy and lengthy. Russian troops entered the main part of the settlement on the 13th of September, and today is the 15th of November, meaning the fighting has continued for more than 2 months and is still not over. However, with the current progress, the prospect of completing the battle no longer seems as remote as it did just a couple of weeks ago. The Zaporizhzhia region has been very active since September, and it seems likely that in November it will once again be the second region after Donetsk in terms of the pace of Russian advances. And I quite realistically assume that if the war does not end, by the autumn of 2026, the Russian army will likely be standing on the outskirts of Zaporizhzhia, from the south and also from the east. Let us continue. By the way, I forgot to mention another update in the Dnipropetrovsk region. It is not shown on the map, but there is information that Russian troops managed to enter Novopavlivka from the side of Molodetska and establish themselves on the eastern outskirts of the village. As always, we will wait for objective control footage before confirming this with certainty. But if this is true, the situation for the armed forces of Ukraine near Medjova is extremely bad, because from the south a breakthrough came from Novopavlivka. We already covered this, and now advances are also beginning from the east, so the pressure is now coming from both directions, south and east. No updates regarding Pokrovsk yet, but there are updates regarding Myrnohrad. The troops managed to finish clearing Sretenska Street and Serov Street and entered the western micro-district, a small block of high-rise buildings. This is exactly what we predicted at the beginning of the battles for Myrnohrad, the division of the city into southern and northern parts, through the western micro-district, the narrowest part of the city. If the troops push through and take these high-rises, then the southern part of the city will be isolated from the main Myrnohrad and will fall quickly. So everything here is moving toward its logical conclusion. Also, over the past 24 hours, Russian troops achieved gains on the Dobropilya sector, specifically near Kharkov. Some people rushed to claim that Kharkov had been captured. This is not true. Although, back on the 20th of October, a military analyst claimed that Kharkov was taken, so this is not the first false start. But the important thing is that real progress exists, and the configuration of the front for the armed forces of Ukraine is getting worse and worse every day. The width of the exit corridor for them here is only 850 meters, and they are trying to withdraw through it in the direction of Sofivka. As you understand, this does not work for everyone, and it is possible that soon we will indeed finally take the long-suffering Kharkov, which has been extremely difficult to capture. The rest of the front sectors remain unchanged. Yesterday, footage with flags from Dnipropetrovsk appeared, confirming that the village is under Russian control. The nearest objective now is to advance to Platonivka and cut the Lyman-Siversk road. When that happens, the Ukrainian garrison in the town will be in very, very serious trouble. A massive missile strike hit Kiev. All of the capital's combined heat and power plants and substations were struck. Russian missile units and unmanned aerial vehicles carried out a powerful attack on the city. The primary targets were Kiev's heat and power plants, heat and power plant number 4, heat and power plant number 5, heat and power plant number 6, as well as the Bila Tserkva heat and power plant in the Kiev region. Several of the capital's substations were also hit. It is possible that the list of damaged energy facilities is even longer. According to Yuri Podolyaka, more than 20 Kinzhal missiles, Iskander missiles, and cruise missiles were launched. More than 100 unmanned aerial vehicles also reached Kiev. The city noted a new tactic in their use, flights at extremely low altitudes, which made air defense operations significantly more difficult. The night was costly for Kiev. Almost 50% of the air defense missiles in Kiev and the region were spent. Ammunition for air defense systems is now being pulled toward the capital from other regions. Zelensky keeps constantly asking sponsors for ammunition for air defense and missile defense systems, but there is none left anywhere. And the prices for these systems have risen by 25 to 30%. A few more such massive missile strikes, and Ukraine will be left only with its air force, without air defense. Approximately $50 to $60 million worth of ammunition was used during last night alone. Ihor Kolomoisky, who is listed as an extremist in Russia, commented on the scandal surrounding Timur Mindich, stating that Mindich is merely a fall guy onto whom they are attempting to shift responsibility for the actions of far more influential figures. I believe that Mindich is a scapegoat. He has absolutely nothing to do with this, the oligarch, who has already spent 2 years in a pre-trial detention center, said. He emphasized that before the scandal, he spoke with Mindich and considers him a good guy. These words came as people in Zelensky's circle have long believed that the investigation into Mindich is the work of Kolomoisky and his longtime partner, Boholyubov. According to the Office of the President, it was they who provided the information that formed the basis of the investigation by the National Anti-Corruption Bureau and the Specialized Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office. And now Kolomoisky's statement looks not just like an attempt to defend Mindich, but part of a far more complex political game. If Mindich indeed becomes the scapegoat, the question arises, who is the more important figure being protected? The President's office prefers not to answer this question. Yet the mere fact that documents were stored in offices linked to Zelensky's entourage points to a much higher level of responsibility. Everything is leading to one person, Zelensky. According to the Telegram channel Legitimate, the globalist Soros-linked groups are inflating Zelensky's rating with the Mindich tapes so that Zelensky becomes more manageable and obedient. They have no task to remove him as long as he fulfills their orders. He is merely a manager, not the leader of an independent national state. But disciplining Zelensky with these tapes, yes. If he keeps pushing his own line, then they will remove him. But they will do it quickly, not to collapse the front entirely, but on the contrary, to reboot it with renewed force. You must understand the main goal of the globalists to prolong the war. It does not matter if, after years, Ukraine collapses and gets partitioned. That is irrelevant to them. That is why negotiations are ongoing. Soon we will understand whether an agreement was reached. If yes, we will see it through Zelensky's quick decisions. Real reshuffles, resignations, the removal of his security bloc, and a tightening of mobilization. If not, Zelensky will be removed swiftly. Now to Germany. an anti-crisis move intended to save the rating of Friedrich Merz. Interestingly, the situation for Merz is so poor that he is being hit, with crossfire from local opposition figures and from Ukrainians. Merz spoke about his conversation with Zelensky. "I want to add something to give the full picture. Today, in a long phone call, I asked the Ukrainian president to ensure that young men from Ukraine do not come to Germany in large numbers but serve their own country. They are needed there. In Germany, social benefits for these refugees will be such that the incentives to work will be greater than the incentive to remain on welfare." Meanwhile, Viktor Orban is fully exploiting the information scandal about Zelensky's corruption. Quoting his statement, "The golden illusion of Ukraine is collapsing. A mafia network from wartime has been uncovered, with countless ties to President Zelensky. The Minister of Energy has already resigned, and the main suspect has fled the country. This is the chaos into which the Brussels elite wants to pour European taxpayers' money, where everything not destroyed on the front line ends up in the pockets of the military mafia. Madness. Thank you, but we do not want to participate in this. We will not send the Hungarian people's money to Ukraine. It can be put to far better use at home. Just this week, we doubled the foster care allowance and approved a 14th pension. In any case, after all of this, we will certainly not give in to the financial demands and blackmail of the Ukrainian president." Thank you for watching. Stay safe, stay informed, and I'll see you in the next update.